commercial audio is now reaching a critical mass audience of 76% of UK adults each week.
Radio still has that ability to cut through and build that emotional connection and create moments that unite millions of people.
It's given us that element of now being able to plan with the head as well as the heart and delivering an actionable and addressable result.
Those contextual moments really connect with people.
By using both broadcast and digital audio together, you're likely to improve your outcomes, whatever your objectives, actually.
Hello and welcome to Advertising Amplified, the podcast from Radiocentre that's all about harnessing the power of radio and audio advertising to boost the impact of your marketing campaigns. Over the next 6 episodes, we're diving deep into the world of radio and audio. We'll be talking to industry experts about everything from the ever-changing audio landscape to the incredible performance marketing capabilities that radio brings to the table. Our goal in this series is to show you how radio's extensive reach and proven effectiveness can help you connect directly with your audience and, as the name suggests, amplify the impact of your advertising. I'm Omar Oakes. I've spent more than a decade as a journalist covering how advertising really works, from boardrooms to studios to the media plans that shape what we see and hear every day. I was founding editor of The Media Leader, and now I work with brands, agencies and media owners to tell smarter stories and ask better questions. And in this first episode, we're unpacking The Speed of Sound, a landmark new report from Radiocentre and MTM that shows how UK commercial audio is expanding in scale, sophistication and effectiveness. To make sense of what this means for advertisers, I'm joined today by Matt Payton, CEO of Radiocentre, Faye Trinquart, Strategy Director at Global's DAX Audio, and Tom Coare, Head of Audio at the media agency OMD UK. So let's get into it. Welcome everyone. For this first episode, I want to tackle some of the most important factors facing commercial audio today, such as why commercial broadcasters still dominate, how multi-platform audio still drives both brand and performance, and where podcasts, measurement tools, and AI, fit into this fast-changing space. But first, let's look at the bigger picture, namely the state of the UK audio market and how it is expanding. And who better to kick this off than Matt Payton, who is CEO of Radiocentre. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Omar.
Let's start with scale. What's the real story behind audio's growth, and why do you think advertisers should be paying attention now more than ever?
Thanks, Omar. I think, look, really radio and audio, the great thing about it, it's always been incredibly adaptable, and audio has been able to leverage its real advantages that it has from being free, from being ubiquitous, from being flexible. And in some ways, it should probably come as no surprise that audio remains so popular and that more people are consuming audio than ever. You only need to look around, when you walk down the street with people with their headphones on, or listening to audio on the way to work, or walking down the street, or listening in the car, or think about your own experiences about how audio accompanies your daily life. And I think it's no accident that that's the case. Audio hasn't stood still. It's adapted, it's innovated using technology. And as a result, there's now more choice, more content than there's ever been before, more ways to listen, particularly on connected devices, smartphones and smart speakers, and more opportunities. You can take audio with you wherever you go. And that's great for us as consumers, but it's also great for advertisers. There's a bigger audience. People are spending more time listening to audio. Crucially, they're listening more, as I say, on connected devices. So there's a more digital audience, so more data is available to be able to optimize those advertising campaigns. And while we all sort of instinctively know all of this and a general sense of those opportunities, I think we felt there was a bit of a vacuum actually in articulating the true scale of audio and its benefits for advertisers. Sometimes I think we were falling into a bit of a trap of there being sort of more heat than light around audio as a platform. So, as you say, we work with this consultancy, MTM, to help address that and provide a bit more clarity. And the outcome was this report, Speed of Sound. And in terms of scale, we measured that using the industry standard data from Radar Midas. And this showed that commercial audio, so audio with ads, is now reaching a critical mass audience of 76% of UK adults each week, and confirmed that that's still growing. The number of hours listened is still growing year on year, and that's pretty remarkable for such a mature market, and not always the case with traditional media channels. And I think it reflects that evolution that we've seen in audio. And the other thing just worth mentioning was, I think the data also showed us that broadcasters are absolutely at the heart of this. They account for the vast majority of listening hours within that ad-funded sort of area, about 90%, and account for the biggest element of advertising revenue. And that's because broadcast radio remains really resilient, but also because broadcasters are a growing presence in other audio like podcasts and streaming.
Yeah, I mean, 76%, that sounds like a lot. I mean, are there any, you mentioned just at the end about the vacuum and the perception that advertisers might have. Are there any misconceptions, do you think, that advertisers might still have about audio's reach, relevance?
Yeah, I think that within audio itself, I think there is certainly a sense that, you'd be forgiven for thinking sometimes that streaming platforms are the key to accessing audiences with audio. But in actual fact, it's broadcasters within that are the biggest element of overall audio listening. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that you think of the success of Spotify and other music streaming platforms. But actually, when you think of the bit where you can actually buy advertising, perhaps the scale of that isn't quite as large as some advertisers and some in the media industry perhaps perceive it.
Yes, for years we've written about Spotify trying to kind of increase their ad revenue, but struggling. I mean, it's still a huge platform, but actually struggled where their own targets they didn't reach. And Matt, you mentioned the central role of broadcasters. It just so happens we have someone from one of these broadcasters with us, Faye Trinquart from Global. So Faye, tell us, how are you're not here to speak on behalf of Bauer, but let's put you in that same bucket. You're the two major audio broadcasters in the UK. How are you, as leading audio platforms, and talk from the DAX perspective as well, the Digital Audio Exchange, how are you blending broadcast and digital to deliver this kind of scale and quality that Matt's been talking about?
Well, I think if you go back more than 10 years ago when we launched DAX, we were the first programmatic digital audio advertising platform, and it was really because we saw a huge opportunity in the listening habits of people, and it's got to be led by people, by audience habits. And so when we built DAX, a huge percentage of our listening continues to be to our radio brands. They're just listening on different platforms. And I think, Matt, you mentioned audio is just and radio is just finding new homes. It's just the adaptability is really what's led to its huge success. So it's no longer chained to the radio set in the living room or the kitchen. It's now able to be wherever your audience is, wherever the audience wants to take it, be that at the gym, be that getting ready for a night out, on the bus, whatever it is. And what we're seeing is that our audiences are choosing the content they want for those different moments. So huge percentage of that is listening to radio, but just on a connected device. And that's because radio still has that ability to cut through and build that emotional connection and create moments that unite millions of people. And it's especially important in this kind of cluttered, fragmented market that we're in right now. Global continues to make storytelling that can work across platforms. So now we don't just think about a story that will work for a radio set. We think about a story that works across radio in a streamed capacity, radio, or a podcast, an extension of that radio, or building a partnership that goes across radio, events, podcasts, whatever it might be. And we really build on that and kind of try and develop that at DAX. So we're always looking at where the audience is listening to audio. And I think as well, the other benefit of it is that as audiences are choosing to listen on the different devices that suit them for their different moments, we're then able to offer advertisers more. So if they're listening on a connected device, it means that we can offer more targeting opportunities. And now I think audio certainly sits right up there with its other kind of what you might have called in the past, like digitally native platforms in terms of the level of data targeting that we're able to apply. And then now we can measure across all those different listening moments as well, which we weren't able to before. So we can tell the advertiser what's working hard across radio, podcasts, audio ads and gaming, whatever it might be.
So Tom, from the media agency OMD UK, you are on the buy side, you represent the advertisers. Talk about this from a planning perspective. how are clients using, I suppose we call it multi-platform audio, as they want to drive both the brand and the activation goals that they might have in mind?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, the report talks about the sort of balance between demand creation and demand conversion. And of course, radio and digital audio are playing very complementary roles in that process. And that's really helped advertisers understand the benefits of each one in combination. It'd be fair to say that we originally sold digital audio to most advertisers as an incremental reach play. You know, we saw the audience moving over there, and it became relevant to follow that consumption into that space. And obviously, that's still of massive benefit. You know, we've seen the growth of things like podcasts, where the audience is very, very different to commercial radio. You know, you've got 25% of the population listening to podcasts now, but it over-indexes in segments that are sort of light consumers of commercial radio. So, you know, under 35s and men and, you know, ethnic minorities. They're traditionally the people not consuming as much commercial radio, as well as things like, you know, BBC listeners who would have followed talent over to the likes of LBC, people who listen to owned music, that sort of stuff. So that reach is still of extra reaches of massive benefit, but we've seen a real sort of evolution in the way that advertisers are thinking about things in a more contextual manner. You know, we've always said that sort of good channels give you both the head and the heart. And actually, radio's always been fantastic at doing the sort of heart job, appealing to people on an emotional basis and building that connection with brands. But now with the digital targeting that we have and the improved capabilities there, we can be a lot more granular and specific with that message. And of course, it gives us a lot more, you know, the advancements in digital audio have tended to come on the side for accountability and sort of measuring the outputs and the responses. And of course, it's given us that element of now being able to plan with the head as well as the heart and delivering an actionable and addressable result.
I think what's interesting about the report is that it also looks at both broadcast radio and digital audio, and sort of it accepts the sort of conventional wisdom, if you like, of broadcast delivering mass reach and digital delivering targeting, but it doesn't put them in a box of only being able to do that. And while it's undoubtedly true that that's the case, I think the picture's a bit more nuanced, and I think, you know, I think it's partly what you're saying, that with digital audio you can actually develop that deeper emotional connection because you're getting a different audience profile, and, you know, you can help support long-term brand building and demand generation with that tailored message that you're providing to that audience. And you can use broadcast actually for short-term performance results, because you can reach them at a point of purchase, you can drive response, and you can get that demand conversion effect as well. So the result is actually you can use, by using both broadcast and digital audio together, you're likely to improve your outcomes, whatever your objectives, actually, because, you know, you can get those benefits and improve what you get.
That's right. And it speaks to the strength of the sort of radio brands that we can view working with groups like Global and Bauer and sort of the radio stations as sort of fully functioning multi-touchpoint channels in their own right. You know, they're in a digital space where they're competing with the likes of, you know, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world and this sort of thing. And of course, people don't consider them to be a line on a digital plan. They consider them to be an inherent part of the strategy. And of course, we can now work with the audio providers on that basis.
But you mentioned, Tom, something interesting at the start of your answer, where you talked about incremental reach and how radio might have been seen from a legacy perspective. But when we have all of these targeting capabilities, these digital channels, the more you want to target, I suppose in general, it could get quite expensive, right? So how, in the advertiser's mind, very generally, of course, but in the let's say a large advertiser's mind, and how they're looking at audio on that media plan nowadays, surely it's not just one advertiser I interviewed at a conference once called radio cheap and cheerful. You definitely wouldn't use those words nowadays. I mean, get inside their head of the advertiser, like how, when you talk to them in terms of how radio is traded, of all these opportunities nowadays, how do you put that on the media plan? Because it's obviously not television, it's not outdoor, but it's not digital display. But you've got targeting capabilities which go across those.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've moved in the last few years to selling essentially audiences to clients rather than impacts or impressions, right? So we are talking about the environments and the context in which advertising appears. I think people understand that digital audio is playing an important role in bringing that new audience to radio content. It's also, I think, an environment, because a lot of it's consumed with headphones or a lot of it is consumed on voice-activated devices in the home in quite personal environments. You add that extra sort of permissibility for advertising. So although you are paying a premium, you are doing it to target in a more nuanced way. And I think you're supplying a piece of advertising that is more engaging and people understand is targeted at them. And people are perhaps more receptive to hearing that advertising and then following through with a response.
Ears are great, aren't they? One on each side of your head for stereo. It's because of ears that radio ads can amplify your advertising. 40 million adults listen to commercial radio every week. That's 80 million ears, give or take. See radio differently at radiocentre.org.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Could you respond to that, Faye? Because Matt mentioned, I think he describes it before as listening habits, and maybe kind of people in metropolitan areas are different to other parts of the country. And definitely when I travel on the train commuting into London, you see everyone with AirPods, and I swear the other day I saw literally 3 people all on Spotify, and scrolling mindlessly, doing other things while listening to audio. I mean, so that might be the perception you have. But how has it changed on the sell side in terms of the things that agencies and advertisers might be asking you to do compared to even 5 years ago before COVID?
5 years ago, I think digital audio was still in its nascent stage. It was still very growing. It was a very fragmented market. And that was one of the reasons we started DAX, was to try and bring it all together and allow advertisers to access what was new time for advertisers. So previously, that time spent commuting would have been, I'm going back a bit here, but like on a Walkman or an iPod, where it wasn't a sort of a live digital listening experience. Now that experience is very much live and digital and of the moment. So we know what the audiences are doing when they're listening. We know how they're feeling when they're choosing to tune into one of our stations, listening on Global Player, or we know if they're choosing to listen to one of our podcasts. And so that insight that we have into audience behaviour has become much more powerful for advertisers. And so agencies have certainly been asking us for more and more of that. And I think the other thing is this won't be news, the emphasis on effectiveness has become huge. This is going back a bit to a previous job I had, but we used to just go and talk about really great ideas, and that was enough. It's not enough anymore. And so the emphasis on being able to show how well digital audio is working alongside the broadcast element is kind of really, I would say, the two things that we focus on the most would be insight from our data and showing that it works. And if we can't do those, then we're in trouble.
Well, I've got lots of questions about effectiveness and insights and outcomes, which is hugely important. But Tom, I just want to pick up on something you said about podcasts and use the word permissibility as well, I think. We are seeing more video podcast content. We're recording in a studio today, but you go into a lot of these podcast recording studios and they're essentially like TV studios almost, and the quality of cameras that you're using nowadays, and everyone wants to be multi-platform on YouTube in addition to podcast platforms. How is that changing how advertisers are thinking about the podcast opportunity? Is there more V in the AV in terms of that mix?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there have always been some brands who don't want to fully enter into the audio space because they want to be visual, and this gives us an opportunity to do that. I mean, video has certainly helped from it's making these podcast properties bigger, right? It's providing an extra sort of shop window for them. It is giving them new audiences. A lot of there's a huge amount of podcast discovery is happening on platforms like YouTube and Instagram, this sort of thing, the short form video things. And, that is promoting it to audiences that perhaps, again, weren't massive consumers of those radio brands to begin with, younger audiences and things like that. So it's certainly been great for amplification of content and giving, radio stations the big media properties to come back and sort of sell to clients. But yeah, I mean, it's, as I say, I think I was told a very good stat by Dax not long ago about the Dyers podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It did Danny Dyer.
Yeah.
So apparently a huge amount of this is consumed via sort of YouTube apps on connected TVs.
Yeah.
And obviously this is providing a huge new sort of landscape of audience for commercial radio products that just didn't exist before.
The method of listening is interesting. You mentioned the content is listened on connected TVs. Yeah. Quite often the video will be on, but they'll be doing something else. So they're still listening to audio in that way, that it's kind of your companion. But there's varying, sometimes it's sitting watching the video because it's like the Dyers. That's great content to sit and watch because you want to see the interactions. Other content we have, we know it might be on a screen, but it's still being primarily listen to.
So you could watch it if you want to.
Watch it if you want to. You might go back and actually, oh, hold on a minute, I just want to catch what they said there. I want to see the reaction in their faces. But I think it's just testament to the way that audio adapts to audiences. And I think at the heart of this, we've got to keep coming back to the point, what are audiences doing? Because that's where we'll follow, and that's where we'll be successful, both in terms of what we can offer advertisers and what we can offer our audiences, because that's, we're a content business at the heart of it, and radio and audio is about great content, no matter how it's consumed.
So given that, Matt, what would you say to advertisers who might still be sitting on the fence? What do they risk missing out on if they're not embracing what we're calling multi-platform audio?
Look, it's clear from everything we've discussed, I think, already, is that they should be paying even more attention to audio, and it's a massive opportunity. As we've heard, audiences are at record levels and are still growing. You've got that resilience and the strengths of the brands in radio, and it's now more measurable and more data driven. So, building on those traditional strengths of mass reach with the data and with the other elements. So the risks really for advertisers, it'll depend on what you're doing currently, but the most obvious one is underinvesting in audio or not investing at all. Or just using broadcast and digital audio in a sort of limited and tactical way, so sort of dabbling with it, but not fully realising its potential. And I think what our report does, in pretty much the clearest way that I've seen, is talk about ways they could be reaping the benefits, especially by using that combination of multi-platform audio to both build their brand in the long term, generate that long-term demand, but also convert that short-term demand. So how can they navigate those risks? Well, if you're already using audio, ask yourself, are you using it to its full potential? Could you be getting more out of it? And how do you do that? There's lots of guidance available on the Radiocentre website, lots of tools that are all free to use to sort of start to think about how you would get the most out of that. And of course, directly with the broadcasters. And if you aren't using audio at all, well, now's your chance. You've got all the ammunition you need there to make the case and to sort of make the argument internally, and the opportunity to sort of pick up and think about a sustained investment with consistent creativity. And if you do that and set your investment at the right level, you'll see the results in terms of the return on investment, in terms of sales, and in terms of outcomes for advertisers.
So you've said the magic words at the end that I was going to pick up on, Faye, and you mentioned this before. So when Matt talks about return on investment, when he talks about outcomes, you said it yourself before, is that advertisers are increasingly demanding more granular, more detail. Show me how this is effective.
Yeah.
We've obviously been talking a lot about the reports, but what more are you trying to give advertisers, and what questions are they asking you?
It's probably the biggest question that we get asked about is effectiveness, and that's why last year we launched DAX ID, which is basically our solution to measurement in audio. We built it for when we thought there was going to be a cookieless future. That changes all the time. Still a very robust tool though. But what's been so great about it is it's really given us an understanding of the audio ecosystem and what radio listened to on a connected device brings alongside podcasts, alongside streaming, alongside audio in gaming, and understanding how the different devices work as well. So the behaviour around a smart speaker has been quite interesting. I was surprised to see how much impact listening to radio on a smart speaker has on campaign effectiveness. So we're now able to to show advertisers the different outcomes that they can expect, and how they can start to tailor their campaigns based on what they're learning. And that's had a huge impact on advertiser behaviour.
And why is that? Why does smart speaker? Are you talking specifically about Amazon Alexa devices?
Yes,
because you can interact with them. Is that why?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's because mostly those speakers are in the heart of the home, and it's kind of been the cliche rolled out about smart speakers. But I do think it's true because they become a part of the family. So they just have that innate kind of, I think, again, go back to it, like the emotional connection, the trusted moment. And they're in that moment when you might be thinking about your car insurance, or you might be thinking about what you're going to feed the kids, or how you're going to plan your holiday. And I think those contextual moments really connect with people.
On the digital side of things, having those extra proof points has been hugely important. And I mean, you talk about things like voice activation and looking for insurance or booking a holiday. You can do all that on your device now.
Yeah.
If you hear an ad for it, there are products which will allow you to then trigger and have a conversation with your device and follow through on those sort of conversion paths. So all of that extra evidence is, I say, hugely important. And in the near future, we will probably start to see more brands trading on those outcomes as opposed to just buying the sort of media space.
What would you say are the smartest entry points into digital audio? Obviously, in analog times, you had regional opportunities. What would you advise smaller advertisers nowadays?
For smaller advertisers coming into digital audio, they can just look for their specific audience if they need to now. So they don't need to buy, to go in and buy a heavyweight campaign on heart is, although radio is effective and efficient, that can still have a relatively high entry point. Whereas now, if you wanted to target a specific audience, you can go and do that probably at a more achievable price point, because you can be a bit more discreet in your targeting. Okay.
Well, Tom, now is your chance. You're sitting here with the CEO of Radiocentre, with one of the big players, one of the big broadcasters sitting next to you. What one thing, on behalf of advertisers, what one thing would give them better insight into audio to enable them to spend more on audio?
That's a tough question. I think, in all honesty, the one thing we've always lacked in the sort of digital audio space is a consistent currency and methodology for understanding how audiences are moving between all the different platforms. And obviously things like GDPR don't really help with this, and the fact that it's a very fragmented market. But we could do with a bit more insight into when someone turns off their linear radio stream and then moves on to listening to a global podcast on their smart speaker, and then perhaps turns that off entirely and moves on to a music streaming service for a bit, and why they come back, and how that content works across all those different platforms.
And we can do that to an extent.
Yes.
You're right. It is something that needs to be built on.
Yeah, radio's always been good at operating as an industry, and perhaps maybe led by radio, digital audio needs to come together a little bit more.
Okay, let's finish with some practical advice for advertisers. What should advertisers do next? Tom?
The multi-platform nature of audio nowadays allows advertisers to sort of work on a kind of full funnel basis. They can take advantage, as I say, of that sort of demand generation and then that demand conversion, and think about audio in a more holistic way than they used to.
Faye?
Come with an open mind. Media owners now are working so closely with media agencies in terms of developing our product, developing the offering, that gone are the days when an agency would kind of just very brief us with a very specific audience. Because we've now got lots of insight and lots of understanding of the behaviours around that content, come to us with an open mind and we can guide you. And we've pretty much got a solution for any brief. I would say but we do.
Intriguing. Matt?
Don't just dabble, invest meaningfully, take the advice from the experts, and invest consistently and meaningfully. I mean, we've done some analysis back to return on investment, that actually if you keep spending more as part of your overall media budget, more on audio, more on radio, up to a point of about 20%, you keep getting better returns on investment. Now, that might sound a bit punchy and a little bit ambitious for a medium that's probably about 5% of budgets on average, but the evidence backs it up. So I think, invest meaningfully, whatever your objective, to get the best results. And I think the other thing, ensure broadcasters are at the heart of your audio plan. Otherwise, you risk missing out on 90% of commercial audio listening. Why would you do that?
Okay, I suppose what we've heard today is that audio isn't just growing, even though it is, it's actually changing quite a lot. And for advertisers, that means rethinking how and where your brand shows up in people's lives. And I suppose also it's not about choosing between radio and digital, it's about recognizing that full spectrum of what audio can do, which is building brands, prompting action, connecting with people in moments that matter. So thanks again to Matt, Faye and Tom for joining me in this first episode. You can, of course, read the full Speed of Sound report via the link in the show notes or at radiocentre.org. And if you want to hear more conversations like this about how advertising is really working right now, please hit follow and join us next time as we explore the role of emotion in audio. Until then, I'm Omar Oakes. Thanks for listening.